Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak to your heart today. Not just your mind, not just your emotions, but your spirit. Because in this noisy world, where everyone seems to be shouting to be seen, fighting to be heard, and rushing to prove their worth, sometimes the greatest power lies not in speaking, but in stepping back. You see, the Bible tells us in Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And today, I want to talk to you about the strength found in silence, about the victory found in restraint, about the comeback that doesn't need an announcement, because it will be so undeniable, they'll come begging to understand it. This message isn't about revenge, it's about revelation. When you step back and let God work, when you stay silent and let your character speak, those who once doubted you will have no choice but to watch and wonder and come searching for the truth you carried all along. Silence is not weakness, it is spiritual strength under control. In a world that constantly urges us to speak up, clap back, and defend ourselves at every turn, the concept of stepping back and staying silent can seem foreign, even foolish. But the truth is, real power doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it shows up in quiet confidence, in stillness, in the refusal to be pulled into petty battles that drain your energy and distract you from your purpose. When you know who you are in God, when you are rooted in truth and anchored in divine identity, you don't have to fight every accusation or explain yourself to every critic. There is a strength that rises when you choose not to react, not out of fear or passivity, but because you recognize that your value isn't up for debate. That's not weakness, that's discipline, that's maturity. That's strength under control. The Bible is filled with examples of this kind of strength. Jesus himself, during his trial, was silent before his accusers. He didn't defend himself, didn't shout over them, didn't justify his actions. He stood in silence, knowing full well who he was, knowing that the truth didn't need to scream to be real. That silence wasn't submission to the enemy. It was submission to the will of God, and that's what gave it power. That's what turned the cross into a victory. You see, it's easy to shout back when someone insults you. It's natural to want to clap back when someone underestimates you. But the supernatural response is to remain still, to trust that justice and vindication don't always come through confrontation, but through consecration. When you step back, you give God room to step in. When you stay silent, you tune your ear to heaven and allow divine wisdom to guide your next move. There's a reason the Bible says in Proverbs 17:28, even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Silence can preserve your dignity, protect your peace, and maintain your focus. It's not about being timid. It's about being wise. It's about understanding that every battle isn't worth fighting, and not every attack deserves your attention. When you learn to control your response, you take control of your life. Think about the people who have tried to stir you, provoke you, distract you. What would happen if you refused to give them the reaction they were looking for? What if, instead of answering insult with insult, you answered with silence and let your fruit speak for you? Because eventually, people will have to reckon with results. They'll have to deal with the undeniable evidence of your growth, your peace, your elevation. And the beautiful thing is, your silence will echo louder than their noise ever did. We've been conditioned to believe that speaking out is always the answer. And yes, there are moments to speak, moments to confront, moments to stand bold and declare truth. But there are also moments when the greatest declaration is your decision to remain unmoved, to stand still while everything around you is demanding a reaction. That's not weakness, that's warfare. That's a kind of strength the enemy doesn't know how to handle. People will call you passive. They'll say you're running away. But only you and God know the power of your silence. Only you and God understand what you're holding back, what you're refusing to release, because you know your response has consequences. You're not staying quiet because you're scared. You're staying quiet because you're wise, because you're protecting your peace, your purpose, and your promise. You're not here to win arguments. You're here to win souls, to fulfill destiny, to glorify God with your life. And sometimes glorifying God looks like turning the other cheek, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to walk away, strong enough to trust that vengeance belongs to the Lord, strong enough to believe that your silence will be a seed that God will water in due time. And when the time is right, when the fruit of your restraint begins to show, those who mocked you, those who dismissed you, those who thought your silence was surrender, they'll come back with questions. They'll come back seeking answers, because strength, real strength, doesn't have to prove itself. It simply is. It stands firm, it endures, and it always speaks, even when no words are spoken. God does his greatest work when we step out of the way. This truth is profound, yet often overlooked. We live in a culture that praises hustle, constant activity, and taking control of every situation. We are conditioned to believe that if we want something done right, we must be the ones to do it. But the spiritual reality is very different. When we learn to release our grip, to surrender our need to control outcomes, and to trust God's timing and methods, that is when his power begins to move most freely in our lives. Throughout the Bible, God's people are called to trust him and wait on him, not to rush ahead with their own plans or try to force situations. Take Moses, for example. When God told him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses had to learn patience and reliance on God's guidance rather than his own strength or wisdom. The parting of the Red Sea wasn't a result of Moses' efforts alone. It was a miracle performed by God when Moses obeyed and stepped back. God's power was fully displayed when Moses lifted his staff and trusted in God's command rather than his own understanding. This principle applies to us today. There are times when the best thing you can do is to stop pushing, stop striving, and stop trying to fix things on your own. Instead, step out of the way and watch God work. It requires humility, faith, and a deep trust that God is both able and willing to act on your behalf. You may feel pressure to keep fighting your battles, to keep arguing your case, or to keep proving your worth. But sometimes your breakthrough will come only after you've learned to let go. God's work often requires us to be still and let him move. The psalmist declares, "Be still and know that I am God," Psalm 46:10. Stillness is not passivity. It is a posture of readiness and surrender. When you step back from the noise of your own thoughts, worries, and efforts, you create space for God to reveal his plan and to pour out his power. He can do immeasurably more than you could ever imagine or accomplish on your own. Many believers struggle because they want to control every detail of their lives, forgetting that God is sovereign. When you step out of the way, you acknowledge that sovereignty. You say, "God, I trust you with this situation, even though I don't see how it will work out. I'm handing it over to you because you are the creator and sustainer of all things." And when you do that, you open the door for miracles. The story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal shows this clearly. Elijah stood back while the false prophets shouted, danced, and tried desperately to call fire from their God. But Elijah prayed simply and quietly, then stepped back. God sent fire from heaven to consume Elijah's offering, proving his power and authority. Sometimes the best way to demonstrate God's power is to step aside and allow him to show up in ways you never could. It's important to recognize that stepping out of the way doesn't mean giving up or being lazy. It means active trust, patience, and obedience. It means saying no to your own impulses and yes to God's timing. It means preparing your heart and hands to receive what God will do rather than trying to force things prematurely. When you step out of the way, you are also stepping into God's rest. The enemy wants you to believe that you must do everything yourself to survive and succeed. But God invites you to enter his rest, a place of peace and confidence that he is working on your behalf. This rest is a spiritual posture that reflects faith and dependence on God, and it allows you to be renewed, refreshed, and ready to receive God's blessings when the time is right. Many times, when people insist on controlling everything, they end up frustrated and exhausted. They miss out on the joy of watching God work in ways far beyond their own abilities. When you relinquish control, you become a vessel for God's power to flow through. You become a witness to his glory as he turns impossible situations into testimonies of grace and mercy. Trusting God enough to step back requires courage. It requires the willingness to face uncertainty without panic. But God promises that when we trust him, he will guide our steps and fulfill his purpose for us. You can rest assured that when you make space for God, he will fill it with his presence, his power, and his peace. So, instead of trying to control every detail of your life or force outcomes through your own efforts, consider what would happen if you stepped back and allowed God to do his greatest work. What if you stopped striving and started trusting? What if you ceased worrying and began resting in his promises? You might discover that the breakthrough you've been praying for isn't found in your own power, but in God's perfect timing and mighty hand. When you step out of the way, you also give God the opportunity to teach you humility and dependence. These qualities are essential for spiritual growth and maturity. Without humility, we try to carry burdens meant for God alone. Without dependence, we fail to experience the fullness of his provision and guidance. Remember, God's plans are higher than our plans, and his ways are higher than our ways. Isaiah 55:9. When you step out of the way, you align yourself with his divine will, allowing him to orchestrate every detail according to his perfect purpose. This alignment brings peace in the midst of chaos and confidence when the path ahead seems uncertain. In the moments when you feel powerless, overwhelmed, or stuck, that is precisely when you are invited to step back and stay silent, trusting God to move. His power is not limited by human circumstances or abilities. When you yield to him, you become part of something greater than yourself, an unfolding story of redemption, victory, and grace. You may not see immediate results, and that can be challenging. But faith is not about what you see. It's about what you believe. Believing that God is working behind the scenes, preparing a way where there seems to be no way, is what sustains you through difficult seasons. So, don't be afraid to step back and trust God's process. Don't rush ahead trying to fix things on your own. Instead, embrace the peace that comes from surrender, knowing that God does his greatest work when you step out of the way. Character speaks louder than any comeback. In the journey of life, many of us are tempted to respond quickly to offense, criticism, or misunderstanding. The impulse to defend ourselves, to clarify, or to retaliate is natural, but it often misses the deeper truth that who we are matters far more than what we say in response. Your character is the foundation upon which your entire life stands. It is the measure of your integrity, your faithfulness, your kindness, and your strength. And it is through your character, not your words alone, that lasting influence and respect are earned. In a world full of noise, where everyone is eager to have the loudest voice or the sharpest comeback, the quiet strength of character can be overlooked, but never underestimated. When you build your life on solid principles and a deep relationship with God, your actions will eventually outshine any argument or defense you might offer. People will watch how you respond over time, how you treat others when no one is looking, how you carry yourself in trials, and how you remain consistent in your values. This is what shapes your legacy and commands respect. The Bible places great emphasis on character. Proverbs 10:9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." Integrity is the cornerstone of character. It means being honest and upright, even when it costs you something, even when no one else is watching. It means living in alignment with God's truth rather than the fleeting opinions of the world. This kind of character withstands attacks because it is grounded in something eternal and unshakable. Think about Joseph in the Old Testament. He was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Yet Joseph did not waste his time trying to defend himself or seek revenge. Instead, he maintained his integrity and trusted God's plan. Over time, his character became so evident that he rose to power in Egypt and was able to save many lives. His life speaks louder than any defense he could have given in the moment of his suffering. The temptation to retaliate quickly can come from pride or fear. We want to protect our reputation or prove our worth. But when we allow pride to drive our responses, we risk damaging our character and losing the very respect we hope to gain. True strength is found in restraint, the ability to remain calm, patient, and gracious in the face of provocation. Jesus himself demonstrated this perfectly. Throughout his ministry, he faced constant opposition, false accusations, and insults. Yet he rarely responded with harsh words. Instead, he showed compassion, wisdom, and forgiveness. On the cross, when he was mocked and crucified, he prayed for those who were crucifying him. His character was so powerful that it transformed hearts and changed the course of history. When you focus on building character, you invest in something far more valuable than winning a momentary argument. You invest in a reputation that will open doors and create opportunities for influence and ministry. People are drawn to those who demonstrate honesty, humility, patience, and love. These qualities speak louder than any verbal comeback ever could. Moreover, character shapes how you handle success and failure. In moments of triumph, character keeps you humble and grateful. In moments of failure or rejection, character keeps you resilient and hopeful. It allows you to learn from your experiences rather than be defined by them. When your character is strong, you do not need to prove yourself because your life itself is the proof. Building character requires intentionality. It means daily choices to live according to your values, to seek God's guidance, and to be honest about your weaknesses. It means being willing to admit mistakes, to forgive others, and to persevere through hardship. Character is not something that develops overnight. It is forged in the fires of trials, refined through patience, and strengthened by faith. People will always talk. They will judge, criticize, and sometimes misunderstand you. But when your character is grounded in God's truth, their words will not define you. You will be secure in who you are and what God has called you to be. And over time, your consistent life will silence critics far more effectively than any comeback ever could. In fact, many times, the most powerful response to criticism or offense is no response at all. Instead, let your character do the talking. Let your kindness, your patience, your integrity, and your faithfulness be the loudest statements you make. Those who truly know you will recognize your value, and even those who oppose you will be forced to reckon with the strength of your character. So, as you face challenges, opposition, or unfair treatment, remember that your character is your greatest asset. It is what will carry you through difficult seasons and position you for future blessings. While words may fade, your character will leave a lasting imprint on the hearts and minds of those around you. It is through character that you truly honor God and reflect His love and righteousness in a world that desperately needs it. Those who mock today will marvel tomorrow. Life has a way of testing our faith, patience, and perseverance through the actions and words of others. Often, those who laugh at our dreams, belittle our efforts, or dismiss our potential don't realize that their mockery is temporary. The very people who doubt us now will be the ones astonished by our triumphs in the days to come. This is a promise of hope and vindication that runs deep through the pages of Scripture and the stories of those who have walked the path of faith before us. When you are mocked or rejected, it can feel like the whole world is against you. You may wonder if you are alone or if your struggles will ever end. But history shows us repeatedly that mockery is often the prelude to glory. Consider the story of David, a young shepherd boy who was laughed at by his own family and overlooked by others. When he faced Goliath, the giant warrior, many mocked him for daring to challenge such a formidable enemy. Yet, through faith and courage, David defeated Goliath, and the very people who doubted him were left in awe. Their mockery was turned into marvel. The Bible encourages us to hold fast during seasons of mockery because God is preparing a divine turnaround. Proverbs 24:17 says, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles." Instead of rejoicing over those who oppose you, you are called to trust in God's justice and timing. The moment when your critics come begging for understanding will not be because of your words, but because of the undeniable evidence of God's favor and your perseverance. It is important to remember that mockery often comes from a place of ignorance, fear, or insecurity. Those who mock others may be struggling with their own doubts and failures. Their laughter is sometimes a defense mechanism to cover their own wounds. But your response should not be to engage in bitterness or retaliation. Instead, embrace humility and grace, knowing that your breakthrough will silence the mockers far more powerfully than any argument ever could. Jesus himself was mocked during his time on earth. The very people he came to save rejected him, ridiculed his teachings, and ultimately crucified him. Yet on the third day, he rose from the dead, conquering death and sin. The same people who mocked him were later transformed by his resurrection. Their mockery was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter of wonder and faith. When you face mockery, it's crucial to focus on your identity in God rather than the opinions of people. Your worth and purpose come from the Creator who made you fearfully and wonderfully. You were designed for more than the judgments of others. By fixing your eyes on God and His promises, you gain the strength to endure and the patience to wait for your moment. The process of moving from mockery to marvel often requires perseverance. It demands that you continue to walk in faith, work diligently, and remain consistent in your character. The people who laugh at your setbacks won't see the long hours of prayer, the sacrifices you make, or the private battles you fight. But all those unseen efforts are building toward a visible victory. There is also a spiritual principle at work. God honors those who honor Him. When you refuse to be discouraged or distracted by mockery, you honor God's plan for your life. You demonstrate faith and trust that God's timing is perfect and His power is sufficient. This posture invites God's intervention and opens the door for miracles. Think about the moments in your own life when you felt underestimated or overlooked. Perhaps you were told you wouldn't succeed, or your dreams were dismissed as impossible. Yet here you are still standing, still believing, still moving forward. Those moments of doubt from others are not your truth. They are merely temporary obstacles that God is turning into testimonies. The transition from being mocked to being marveled at often involves a change in perspective. Instead of focusing on the negativity or the voices of criticism, choose to see these moments as opportunities for growth. Let the mockery refine your faith, sharpen your resolve, and deepen your reliance on God. The pain you feel now will become the power you display later. When your breakthrough comes, those who once mocked will come seeking answers. They will want to know the secret to your success, the source of your peace, and the reason behind your resilience. And at that moment, your silence or your humble testimony will carry far more weight than any defensive words could. This is why patience is so important. The timing of your victory may not align with your own expectations. You may have to wait longer than you want, and that waiting can be difficult. But waiting is not wasted time. It is preparation time. It is during this period that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances and strengthening your spirit for what lies ahead. Remember, every great comeback story is preceded by a season of challenge and doubt. Your story is no different. The mockers are simply the opening act. The main event is your triumph. Trust that God is writing your story with a purpose, and the chapters of mockery will give way to chapters of marvel. So when you feel the sting of mockery, do not despair. Hold on to your faith, maintain your integrity, and keep your eyes fixed on the promises of God. Your breakthrough is coming, and when it does, the very ones who once doubted you will stand amazed, humbled, and, yes, even begging for a place in the story God has written through your life. As we come to the close of this message, remember this. True strength isn't found in loud words or quick comebacks, but in the quiet power of faith, patience, and character. When you step back and stay silent, you're not giving up. You're making space for God to move in ways only He can. Your silence today is a testimony of trust, your restraint a declaration of strength, and your unwavering character a beacon that will shine brighter than any criticism. So hold fast, keep walking in integrity, and trust that those who mock you now will one day come back amazed, humbled by the victory God has prepared for you. Step back, stay silent, and watch, because your breakthrough is on its way, and it will be too powerful to ignore.